after the faulty equipment was repaired by ZNBC engineers. However, the current transmission coverage is only for Chui Island. In future, the government will consider upgrading the transmitters to improve coverage in the area. At B, on the estimated cost of the project, Madam Speaker, the project to upgrade the FM radio 1 and 2 for Chui Island is estimated to cost 1.2 million kwacha. Additionally, Madam Speaker, ZNBC has already procured 20 transmitters at the value of 50 million kwacha to ensure that such transmitters can be distributed to areas where there is that need boosting of the transmission services of the radio frequencies. At C, as to why it has taken long to rehabilitate transmitters. Madam Speaker, the rural FM expansion project is an ongoing project being undertaken by the government, Republic of Zambia, through the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation, and the issue of upgrading some transmitters to improve coverage in some districts will be considered in the next phase of the project. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Supplementary questions. The Honorable Member for Chirubi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted the Minister whether he is aware that before 9th January 2014, before 9th January 2014, Chirubi has been experiencing problems both for 1 and 2 FM transmitters. Are you aware of that? And maybe just on the same, let me write on the same, is that you did indicate, or maybe I can come for the second question, Madam Speaker.
You've got 2 allocations.
Okay.
Let's start with that one.
Okay.
The Honorable Minister of Information and Media.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am aware to the extent that the Member of Parliament asked a question relating to the breakdown in transmission, to which we have adequately responded to. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Chirubi.
Now that you are aware that Chirubi is not Chui Island only? Hello?
The Honorable Members, order. Let's give him chance. Huh? You can continue, Honorable Member for Chirubi.
Okay, Madam Speaker, thank you for the protection. Chirubi comprises of Chui mainland, Chui Island, and the swamps. And when we look at the mass in terms of land, you find that the area that is being covered could be the smallest area if we are to consider mass. Though the Chui Island has got about 10 wards, the 13 wards are in the swamps, and the other 11 wards are in the mainland. Now, looking at what is being covered is a very small radius. He mentioned over 2 million investment, and we are hoping that that of some sort, especially with the radius in terms of coverage. So when are we likely to have that 1.2, especially with a boost that we should have upgraded radius, we should cover the whole Chirubi?
The Honorable Minister of Information and Media.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Earlier on, Madam Speaker, I did indicate that ZNBC has already procured 20 transmitters that are to be dotted in those areas of need. And the areas of need will be informed by the experts on the ground, and such information is very valuable for us through ZNBC to be able to take into account. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The last member, the Honorable Member for Kasenengwa.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Partially answered my question. I still want to press Chilubi is having problems in terms of transmission, when are the people of Chilubi going to benefit from those 20 which have already been bought? Do they have to wait to be advised when allocation will be done, when actually the minister is already aware that Chilubi has got problems? Why can't they promise the honorable member who is here right now? Because I know that the people of Chilubi are anxious. They're actually very happy to see that the honorable member has raised this question. And the Minister of Information is giving them promises, and yet he's got the equipment. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Information and Media.
Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I thank the Honourable Member of Parliament. Serve to indicate, Madam Speaker, that if it were indeed the possibility that as and when a minister is standing and there is a need, we begin to promise to act there and then, would end up in a very haphazard way of managing national resources. It has to be methodical and systematic. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Notice of motion. The Honourable Member for Kalabo Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do adopt the report of the Committee on Legal Affairs, Human Rights and Governance for the third session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on 21st June 2024.
Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Seconded by the Honourable Member for Chilubi. The question is that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Legal Affairs, Human Rights and Governance on the fight against corruption in Zambia for the third session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Friday, 21st June 2024. Any debate? The Honourable Member for Kalabo Central.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with its terms of reference set out in Standing Orders 209F and 210 of the National Assembly of Zambia, Standing Orders 2024, the Committee on Legal Affairs, Human Rights and Governance considered a topic entitled The Fight Against Corruption in Zambia. Madam Speaker, as you are aware, the committee requested for written memoranda from stakeholders on the topical issue and undertook local tours to 4 provinces, namely Lusaka, Central, Copperbelt, and Northwestern provinces. These accorded the committee an opportunity to gain first-hand information on the efforts various players are making in the fight against corruption, and also on the challenges that the institutions involved in the fight against corruption are facing in the discharge of their mandate. Madam Speaker, since the honourable members of this august House have had the opportunity to read the committee's report, I will highlight only a few concerns encountered by the committee. Madam Speaker, from the outset, the committee wishes to state that it abhors corruption of all forms. The committee strongly urges all citizens to look at corruption as a crime against humanity. Corruption deprives citizens of much-needed service delivery in all sectors, such as health and education. All honourable members who agree that corruption is a cancer that must be fought by all who wish to see our great country soar. The committee acknowledges the existence of a legal and policy framework, together with institutions mandated to fight corruption in Zambia. Madam Speaker, the Anti-Corruption Commission, through its governing law, the Anti-Corruption Act number 3 of 2012.
Order, honorable member. The honorable member for Lunte, you don't have a seat. Do you have a seat, honorable member? Can you please take your seat? You are distracting the proceedings of the House. Can you please take your seat or invite the member you are chatting with just to walk out and caucus, then you come back. The honorable member will continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will repeat. Madam Speaker, the Anti-Corruption Commission, through its governing law, the Anti-Corruption Act number 3 of 2012, is mandated to provide for the prevention, detection, investigation, prosecution, and punishment of corrupt practices and related offenses. This is based on the rule of law, integrity, transparency, accountability, and management of public affairs and property. The Commission is also mandated to provide for the development, implementation, and maintenance of coordinated anti-corruption strategies through the promotion of public participation. Madam Speaker, the committee notes that the key pieces of legislation that govern the fight against corruption in Zambia are adequate. An issue of concern for the committee, however, is the definition of public officer in Article 266 of the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia, as compared to the definition of Section 3 of the Anti-Corruption Act. The much narrower definition in the Constitution presents a challenge to the fight against corruption. Madam, the definition of public officer in the Constitution, which is supreme law of the land, excludes certain officers like permanent secretaries, judges, and other judicial officers, while the Anti-Corruption Act includes them. The committee, therefore, recommends that the Anti-Corruption Act should be amended to redefine public officer, define other office holders who should be amenable, such as constitutional office holders and judicial officers, as per the definition of the Constitution, and to extend the Commission's mandate to these officers. Madam Speaker, Section 11 of the Anti-Corruption Act empowers the Director of the Anti-Corruption Commission as the only person who can order for investigations and also call for their end. The committee is of the view that such a provision is susceptible to abuse by the Director General. The committee recommends, therefore, that these provisions must be amended so that certain categories of investigations officers can have powers upon receipt of a complaint or of corruption report on reasonable suspicion to start the process of investigations and only allow the Director General to give consent to prosecute upon being furnished with a certificate of investigation. Madam Speaker, Section 64 of the Anti-Corruption Act provides that power to give consent to prosecute lies with the Director of Public Prosecution. The committee views this is a hindrance and a challenge to the fight against corruption. In this regard, the committee recommends that the power to grant consent to prosecute corruption cases should be reposed in the AC's Director General. Thus, this will work in line with the creation of the Specialized Division for the Financial Crimes Court, which has a time bar, in that the Director General, upon satisfaction that there is a prima facie case as produced by the officers, will then consent for immediate prosecution. Under the current regime, the Director of Public Prosecutions needs to conduct his own due diligence before granting consent, and can also enter a nolle prosequi. Granting a nolle prosequi without obligation to explain. In fact, Madam Speaker, the Director of Public Prosecutions does not even need to consult the ACC. The Director General who established the case and satisfied himself or herself that there was a probable cause. Madam Speaker, the role of the whistleblower in the fight against corruption should not be underestimated. A factor that is an impediment to the fight against corruption is the inadequate provision for the protection of a whistleblower. The committee, therefore, recommends that whistleblower protection be enhanced and that rewards be provided for the whistleblower upon successful conviction. Madam Speaker, I am confident that the recommendation by the committee in this report will receive the necessary urgent attention so that this terrible cancer can be managed effectively. Allow me to render my sincere gratitude to all the stakeholders who gave both written and oral submissions to this which greatly assisted the committee in its work. I wish to conclude by thanking your office and the Office of the Clerk of the National Assembly for the guidance and support rendered to the committee throughout its deliberations. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak now or later?
Now, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chilubi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me, in seconding the motion, to thank the Chair who has ably moved the motion as it was discussed by the committee. Madam Speaker, I'll try to theme my submission into three things. That is the use of management and of forfeited properties and integrity committees, and lastly, the gift policy in Zambia. Madam Speaker, when we were doing tours, it came out so strongly that property of high value is being forfeited to the state, but the law enforcement agencies that are involved in making sure that this property is forfeited to the state is actually being troubled with things like transport, accommodation, and other instruments. You find, for instance, we were at the SEC headquarters. We found that there was no power. And yet, among the items that the SEC would have seized is a high-value generator that they would have used to power the housing system so that they can carry out their work properly. Madam Speaker, when we look at institutions like the DEC and the SEC are currently renting accommodation as in terms of office space, and this has compromised their work because on rented accommodation and office space, they are failing to install security measures and security instruments which can help them facilitate the fight against corruption. Madam Speaker, we would like to state that corruption, when we talk about corruption, is petty, is grand and institutional, meaning that everybody is involved in the sake of corruption, and it doesn't have groups that should be associated with corruption, and that was also spoken so strongly that corruption involves everybody. Having said that, Madam Speaker, of great concern also is where the anti-corruption headquarters is positioned. I'm sure, Madam Speaker, you know that the headquarters is in town where there is a lot of noise and town crying is going on and all that. And that is not a conducive environment. Madam Speaker, allow me also on this point to underscore that the definition that the chairman did refer to earlier is that of contradiction, where the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, is narrower than section 3 of the Anti-Corruption Act, meaning that if any amendment has to be called, it has to be the Constitution, because there was a conflict where we could not amend the Constitution to fit, the Act to fit into the Constitution, because the one which is in Article 266 is narrower than the one in the Principal Act of the Anti-Corruption. And I think that was the position. Madam Speaker, the question of integrity committees was welcomed by different stakeholders, and that integrity committees have been playing more of a role of grandstanding than actual delivery vehicles to fight against corruption, especially in workplaces. And to underscore this, you find that the issue of integrity committees, yes, currently they seem to be reporting under the SEC, but there was a strong submission that the integrity committees can be housed under the Office of the Public Protector, looking at the constitutional requirements that are given, the constitutional mandate that is given to the Public Protector. Madam Speaker, on this score, the reporting line was envisaged that it could improve if it was given under the Public Protector, because some of the issues that may be coming to the fore would involve maybe anti-corruption officers and the like, and the Public Protector's office was better positioned to tackle such. And I think I can see that the new Minister of Justice is stressing herself, and I would only think that she's doing so in gearing to amend the definition in the Constitution so that it fits, it matches with the Anti-Corruption Act, and I have all confidence that I think the Minister is up to the game. Madam Speaker, I want to underscore on the issue of the gift policy. In looking at the factors that go into this, there was an analysis that was done on what is happening in other countries. Currently, Zambia doesn't have a gift policy. Madam Speaker, many of the public officers, as referred to also in Section 3 of the Anti-Corruption Act, do not know where a gift starts from and where a gift ends, and where it goes in the domain of corruption. This was overemphasized, Madam Speaker, because many of the public officers, for instance, I'm just giving an example, Madam Speaker, I hope it's not offensive, that maybe an investor would go to the Minister of Mines and give a gift to a PS or the Minister as when they are paying a capital score. And this same investor is also interested in receiving mining licenses. And at the end of the day, maybe that gift is, for instance, $1 million. And the minister has received. Maybe the minister, money is empty, or the parent secretary has received. They don't know where to take this. And because there is no clear, gift policy, if we are to look at $1 million, it's really something that we cannot call a gift. It's an inducement towards something. And at the end of the day, you find that may cause conflict in the way we fight against corruption. And I think other factors that were emphasized, that since corruption is petty, it's also institutional, and it's grand. There was was need that public awareness is done at different levels, where even the traditional leaders are involved, so that it becomes embedded. And one thing that was emphasized, also in line with the gift policy, is that of our national values, enshrined in Article 8 of the Constitution, that there was need that this anti-corruption fight can also match with the national values that are enshrined in Article 8, so that as people grow, they are growing this culture and values such that they envisage. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I submit that it's now in the ball of the Minister of Justice to take it up, so that certain issues that have to do especially with some legal surgery on the legal framework can be attended to. I submit, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any further debate? The Honourable Member for Skongo.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity given to the people of Skongo to add a few words to the motion on the floor of the House. Allow me first to thank my brother, Honourable for Kalabo Central, for the able manner in which he has moved the motion, as well as my brother from Chirubi for seconding the motion. Madam Speaker, indeed, corruption is a cancer that we all must fight, and fight very hard. Because unfortunately for us as a country, this cancer went so deep into our flesh, to the extent that actually if we pay lip service to it, it may defeat us at the end of the day. I would like to mention that actually Congo is underdeveloped, I think to a large extent because of this corruption that we have had in this country for a long time. And sadly for me, Madam Speaker, whenever this discussion of corruption comes up, what comes to my mind first, of course, is the PF. And when I say PF, I mean the PF of the former President, President Edgar Chagwarungu, and not that one of Honourable for Matero, Honourable Sampa. Madam Speaker, I know when we mention these things, other people might think that maybe we are just trying to be personal. But I think I want us to be very realistic in here. The fact that corruption was so rampant in the previous administration, I think is seen in the number of cases that are before the courts of law. So I think let us pick it from there and ensure that this fight should not be politicized, because it's a fight that all of us are supposed to pay attention to, regardless of our political affiliation, for the betterment of our country. Because when you look at the resources that have been lost due to corrupt activities, I think there are so many. They could have moved this country to a very high level in terms of development. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, those that are corrupt are like drug dealers. They are every time trying to come up with new approaches and new ways of how.
Order, Honourable Member. There is an indication for a point of order. The Honourable Member for Lunte.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order number 71. I rise on this point of order on my honourable colleague, the MP for Congo. And I do so for his choice to draw in the Patriotic Front in his discourse, and drawing in the Patriotic Front in a very bad way. Madam Speaker, the MP for Congo is a UPND Member of Parliament who knows that lithium was looted in this administration and was brought back at the border. He knows that Sujlight was looted and was caught. Madam Speaker, earlier today we were discussing the hunting concessions which were illegally cancelled. We have been talking about the FISIP procurements, fuel procurements, Madam Speaker. This honourable colleague cannot, Madam.
Order, Honourable Members. Though I said order, Honourable Members, in order for you to continue smoothly.
Thank you, Madam.
Wind up.
Thank you, Madam. I wind up, Madam Speaker, by saying people have been corruptly bunched at the Cabinet Office, 400 plus people corruptly benched against government procedures, Madam Speaker. Is the Honourable MP in order to apportion corruption to Patriotic Front when he knows that corruption, even this report is clear, has become rampant under the UPND government? Is he in order to talk like that, Madam Speaker?
Order, honorable members. I think what you've brought out, honorable member, is not even important at this point. What is important, honorable members, is that we've got a report. And the report is very specific to the matter of fighting corruption. It does not mention UPND, it does not mention PF. It's just a report telling us how the country, what is limiting the country to fight corruption. What are the challenges? Is the law okay in regards to corruption? What are the challenges that these implementing institutions are facing? So, honorable members, I think let's not waste time. The report is very, very clear. And the people, they want to listen to this report. It's a very important report. We have to make progress. So let's restrict ourselves to debating this report so that we make progress. We want as many members to debate this very important report. So let's restrict ourselves to the report before us. The honorable member will continue. You are with the guide.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I think I was just giving you a preamble because, you see, we cannot talk about corruption in a vacuum. The fact that this report had to be tabled or people had to go out and look at this issue is because it's there. So I was just trying to give you a preamble where we are coming from. Now, Madam Speaker, I was saying that corruption is like, can be likened to drug dealers who are always coming up with new ways and means of how to beat the game. So my appeal to this government, the new Dawn administration, is to be alert, because those that are corrupt are can start to come up with new means and ways of how they can beat the law enforcement agencies. But I'm comforted by the fact that the report, of course, mentions that in terms of legal provisions, I think this country is well, that aspect is well provided for. But I think just to give a caution that let's not keep our eyes closed, because those that are corrupt are very scamming. They can come up with anything. So this means that if we are this fight that we have, which is so important, I think those that are given the responsibility to fight this fight on our behalf, the law enforcement agencies, it's indeed true that they need support in terms of funding, in terms of technology, equipment, in terms of how we take care of them, their accommodation, the issues that have been brought out as challenges which they are facing. My appeal is the new Dawn administration should take time to look at these issues seriously so that these officers are not going to find themselves in this corrupt vice themselves. Because if you don't motivate them properly, then the end result is that they also try to find means and ways of how they can survive. Because corruption, those that are corrupt have got huge sums of money. They can easily buy their way out. And that's the more reason why even fighting corruption becomes very difficult. Because those that are corrupt can use their money to buy their way out of cases. Again, I don't want to be very political. I'm just trying to mention things as they are. The report talks about the forfeiture of properties from those that are corrupt. I think we have seen in our country how much we have managed to recover from those that have looted our resources. So, but the good thing, again, is the fact that the administration that we have through President Hakainde Hichilema is putting these resources that are being recovered to good use. And I think that should be commended. That's how it should be, because we are not seeing an administration that is maybe like hiding these resources that are being collected from those that are corrupt. Madam Speaker, I want to end by saying that your report also talks about issues of human rights. And I think I want to end on this note by saying that human rights are very important to our people. And one of those, of course, is the human right, the expression. People are given the freedom to express themselves freely. And I think, again, it is sad that when you are given the opportunity to express yourself freely, instead of you giving credible checks and balances to the ruling party, you start talking about issues that are not relevant. I think that is not good. What we want to see in this country is an opposition that is able to give credible checks and balances. And those balances or those checks should be ones that are able to contribute positively to the development of our country. Because I find it very interesting that in this country, the opposition think that they are not part and parcel of developing the country. They want to oppose even the development that is coming to our own country. So I think my appeal to my colleagues, those who are in the opposition, is that even when you are in the opposition, you are still part of the development process of the nation. So can you oppose credibly? Because the people out there are still counting on you to help in the development discourse of our country.
Not to destroy the country.
But finally, again, I want to say that, you see, human rights are very important. We have seen in the past how the report again comes out in terms of electoral violence. It talks about electoral violence and how, we use it again to disadvantage our country. We had a situation where people didn't want to go to school because they thought being commanders was the shortcut to being rich. So what we want to see is a situation like what we are seeing now, where the president is encouraging free education. Free education being given to our people so that they go to school, they see the importance of education, so that they are able to contribute positively. Let us not use our youths to fight for us as politicians. Let's use our youths to develop this country. How we take them to school, we empower them with the skills, so that they're able to build these schools and the classroom blocks that we are doing under the CDF. We give them employment, like what we have seen in the New Dawn administration. So, Madam Speaker, I think I don't want to go very far. I would like to end by saying that what we are seeing now is as a result of the leadership which is focused and knows what he's doing. So President Hakainde Hichilema should be commended in the manner in which he's taking the fight against corruption and the way he's handling human rights. As we speak right now, the democratic space has been expanded as opposed to what we hear of the democratic space shrinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable members, there is no need of standing to raise a point of order. When we are debating this report, you have your chance. Just the debate, and the Honorable Minister will come and respond. I'll be alternating. The Honorable Member from Nkana.
Madam Speaker, thank you so very much for this opportunity for me to just add a few words on the report by your committee on the fight against corruption. I must state from the preamble, Madam Speaker, that corruption has denied countries of the much needed resources for development. But the fight on corruption, Madam Speaker, is very complicated and very sophisticated. One we stand to lose if we don't pay attention to what ought to be done. Madam Speaker, for me, when I look at the report, I want to believe that if we were to effectively fight or win the fight on corruption, it must start from Article 8 of our Constitution, which espouses or brings out issues of our values, our moralities, our ethics. Because, Madam Speaker, we need to go back to the basics. A child must be trained to grow up uprightly with good moral values. Such a child, even the Bible states, Madam Speaker, if you train a child to grow up in good ways, even when they grow up, they will not depart from those ways. some of us today, Madam Speaker, no matter you flip the pages, you will never antagonize us on corruption issues because we were brought up very well. That is what we need to do. Madam Speaker, we need to go back to the basics, start to train our children to grow up with good moral values. Now, Madam Speaker, the fight against corruption is dependent on institutions, the anti-corruption, the courts, the DPP. For as long as these institutions are not independent, for as long as they are not autonomous, we stand to lose this fight. Madam Speaker, the Constitution places or is supreme to any law. And here we are in this august house. Our primary role is to legislate, come up with laws that would help us even in the fight against corruption. But even when we enact new laws, we must ensure that we don't enact laws that again goes against the supremacy of the Constitution, against what the Constitution dictates. In this discussion, I want to focus on one particular law, the law on the forfeiture of proceeds of crime. Madam Speaker, the Constitution places the burden of proof on the people that will allege that you have committed a crime. If anyone alleges that Binwe has committed a crime, the Constitution dictates that you must prove that I actually committed that crime. So any law that shifts that burden is now and void because the Constitution is supreme. Again, the Constitution emphasizes on innocence before a competent court proves you otherwise. Those two principles in our laws are very sacrosanct, very important. The burden of proof, the presumption of innocence. This law, the forfeiture of proceeds of crime, unfortunately, over the years, and I'm not referring to the UPND government, has been highly abused and has been used as a tool to fix political opponents. Because in the forfeiture, Madam Speaker, you wish to know, the forfeiture of proceeds of crime provides for the confiscation of proceeds of crime. That is only when you are satisfied that this particular property is a proceed of crime can you confiscate. It also provides for the deprivation of any person of any proceed, benefit, or property. The abuse, Madam Speaker, is to the effect that today law enforcement agencies will deprive you of your benefits in a property based on an assumption that you have committed a crime, which is totally against the Constitution. Only until you prove by all reasonable standard that I have committed a crime can you confiscate and deprive a benefit in something that I own. Madam Speaker, we as the August House ought to start re-looking at some of these provisions of the law. Because today, Madam Speaker, and it may look funny today and fancy today that you see your friend being antagonized in the media that he is involved in corruption, their houses are immediately repossessed or deprived or taken away. Only after 10 years of the case being, disposed of, they are found innocent. Can you imagine the anguish in the period when their property would have otherwise been in the hands of the state? That law, Madam Speaker, that law is not a good law. It needs to be relooked at. For me, I'm prepared to support any reasonable fight against corruption, but not anything that goes otherwise to antagonize citizens on the basis of mere assumptions or allegations. There must be proof that I have committed a crime. A competent court must otherwise rule and convict me, that is when the state must come in. Because, Madam Speaker, the danger is this. Some of these members of parliament who are here, left and right, have acquired wealth. I'm not saying Honorable Jack Mwimbo has acquired wealth, but I'm saying some of these have acquired wealth.
Honorable members, let's not debate ourselves.
No.
Let's not
Forgive me,
debate
Madam Speaker.
ourselves.
Madam Speaker, all of us, because we are working, we have acquired wealth. We have built houses. Madam Speaker, this law, when that time comes, will make the police take away that property you would have acquired under sweat until the matter is disposed of by the courts, God forbid, after 10 years. Which is why, for me, we must stop and check this law. Sensationalization, Madam Speaker. People have built names over years. You allege that I've committed a crime, you go into the media, parade me in the media. When I am found innocent after 20 years, are you going to help clean up my name? Which is why, Madam Speaker, yes, we want to support the fight against corruption, but it must be done so within the confines of the law and bearing in mind that the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, dictates that everybody is innocent until proven otherwise. Madam Speaker, I submit.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Sinazongwe.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for an opportunity given to the people of Sinazongwe to debate this committee's report. Ably moved by the Member of Parliament for Kalabo Central and seconded by MP for Chilubi. Madam Speaker, the challenges that the report has raised are very, very genuine. And if really we want to fight corruption of yesterday, we should be very much willing, Madam Speaker, to fight the corruption of today, so that we can protect the resources for our future generation. Madam Speaker, it reminds me of those days when I was still young in the village, when I used to hunt. I never had a gun, Madam Speaker. I was using dogs and a spear. But what I used to do, Madam Speaker, I used to take care of my dogs. They were well fed. I'm not referring to anti-corruption as dogs. No. I'm just giving you a typical example, Madam Speaker, of how I traversed in my life. Madam Speaker, even when I went to hunt, I came back with an animal. My father used to give me a special steak. That was one way of rewarding me, so that tomorrow I could go back in the bush to go and hunt. Madam Speaker, same applies to the Anti-Corruption Commission officers. What they are doing, Madam Speaker, they are risking their lives. Like what has been alluded to by the chairperson of the committee, they are risking their lives. Because these people are involved in corrupt activities, Madam Speaker, they are heft in terms of resources. Now, look at the conditions of service for the Anti-Corruption Commission workers. They don't have transport. Even talk time allowance is a challenge. Officer accommodation is a challenge. The take-home pay is a challenge. Fighting billionaires, it is not a joke, Madam Speaker. Even any person can end up being tempted if we don't take a radical stance, Madam Speaker, of handsomely rewarding these people. We need, if we really want to achieve the meaningful fight, let us look at the conditions of service for these gallant men and women who are doing a noble job to see to it that resources that are meant for our future generation and also the country are protected. Madam Speaker,
Order, honorable members, I didn't give you the floor. I think there is a procedure for that which we have to follow. If somebody is not appropriately dressed, there is a procedure that we are supposed to follow. The honorable member for Sinazongo, you may continue.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, even if it meant sacrifice for our gallant men, for how long are they going to sacrifice? At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, time will come when they will retire. They will meet the same people they were grabbing property, illegal property from. What is their safety? What is there for them, Madam Speaker, to say, even when they leave employment, they will not end up being destitute? Looking at the noble job that they are doing, I believe, Madam Speaker, it's new Dawn administration, we need to take this fight and the stance very, very seriously. By one, we have to look at rewarding our great gallant men and women. Two, the whistleblowers, that, like what has been reported by your committee, Madam Speaker, they do a great job, but at what expense? What do they take home? Because they risk their lives. Corrupt people are sophisticated, Madam Speaker. They are very, very sophisticated. Someone should have somewhere to lean on in an event that anything happened to them. So we need to take this stance very seriously. And also, Madam Speaker, when you look at even the property that are being recovered, for them to be disposed, it takes so long. By the time they are being disposed, value would have been lost. We need, when there is still, at least there is still value for even the vehicles that are recovered and other assets, there should be a time frame, Madam Speaker, that should be put into the law to say within such a period, all the assets and properties should be exposed so that the resources are taken to where they belong. If we stand as members of Parliament, Madam Speaker, together to fight corruption, each constituency, under the able leadership of President Hakainde Hichilema, each constituency can walk away with even over 100 million kwacha per annum as under CDF. Because we are seeing where the resources are going, so we need, as members of Parliament, to work hand in hand with the Anti-Corruption Commission in trying to help them do their noble duty. With these few words, Madam Speaker, I do support the committee's report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll come back to the member for Kawata. The honorable member from Porokoso will alternate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to add my views on the reports on the floor of the House. Madam Speaker, I will start by joining others that have sent their wishes to Honorable Jeje Banda, our Honorable Member of Parliament, who is somewhere in Eastern Province under police custody. We wish him well. Madam Speaker, I'll start by agreeing with the move of the motion, where the committee made observations that there's a limited scope within which the fight against corruption is implemented. Madam Speaker, to properly fight corruption, we first must understand and be able to properly define what corruption is. In other jurisdictions, Madam Speaker, there is a broadened definition of corruption. Corruption, Madam Speaker, should not be understood to be a mere taking or giving of bribes. But it involves actions that put private interest over and above public interest. And this will be in relation to administration, policy, and legislation. So, Madam Speaker, with that broadened definition of corruption, we should be able to properly fight corruption. In other words, we can come up with a simple test. When there's a policy from government, put it to test. Was that particular policy in favor of private capital or public interest? And the answers are all there to see. The moment we are able to define a corruption, we will then be able to see the corruption in some of the policy decisions that governments take. Yes. For instance, Madam Speaker, there is a non-mining house that stole $2.5 billion from the CMIH, and the matter was before the police. Directors of that company were actually arrested. A minister comes up, withdraws the case, and the $2.5 billion is gone. In that particular case, Madam Speaker, if we're able to put that action to that test, we all should be able to see without any difficulty that there was something wrong. There are restriction orders currently on people's apartments, 3, 4, 5 flats, a truck, 2, 5 vehicles, restriction orders. They are appearing before the police. But these directors that took away the wealth of this country to the tune of $2.5 billion are out there enjoying the money. Yeah. What motivated that individual, that minister, to make such a decision? Those are questions that we must ask. We are talking about recoveries, Madam Speaker. Recoveries of goods obtained corruptly. Why should we abandon $2.5 billion properly earned by one of our corporate bodies and chase after flats in Kabwata, in Ibex here, and say we're fighting corruption? Madam Speaker, we have to define corruption for what it is. Once we put the definition of corruption in its proper context, we begin to see through a lens. If you look at road concessions, for instance, being given today, you'll be able to see and realize that indeed some of these decisions are not made in public interest, but private interest. How then can it be that with all the collective wisdom seated here, some gentleman just walks in and says, I'm coming to borrow money from your institutions and I'm going to build you a road, but I'll collect tolls for the next 25 years. That is an insult to the collective wisdom of the Zambian people, because that is something that we can do on our own. But the question still remains. Let's put that to a test. The decision at that particular point, was it made in public interest or private interest? Private interest. Madam Speaker, a mining house owes Zambia Revenue Authority $1 billion. $1 billion. Yes. Right now we're at the IMF looking for $1.3 billion. There's $1 billion owed to us. And the minority shareholder of that company now reveals to us to say that tax has been forgiven. They are only going to pay $23 million. What corruption are we fighting? The question that begs is that let's have a broadened definition of corruption. Corruption, Madam Speaker, is not a mere taking or giving of bribes, but it involves actions that put private interest over and above public interest. This is the real test that we have to put these decisions through. Madam Speaker, today, we have paper tigers coming in the name of Vietnamese investors to come and get 6 million hectares of land. The transaction.
The honorable member, I think that matter was brought out in during matters of...
well guided, Madam Speaker.
We didn't conclude on that. So let's not mislead the public, because we don't know. There was an assignment that was given to the honorable member to raise the question on that. It wasn't concluded.
Madam Speaker, the law is very clear. The Constitution is very clear on the disposal of public assets. Yes. We have situations today where the executive can ignore and abandon the law and go and transact on a public asset. But today we must be on the floor debating on the fight against corruption. This parliament is there to provide oversight. for and on behalf of the Zambian people, that if a particular asset that belongs to the Zambian people is about to be disposed of, it will come to the House of Representatives so that they have a voice. But today we have transactions being conducted outside and away from this House. And yet, somebody out there is going to stand up and talk about the fight against corruption. The biggest challenge, Madam Speaker, why they've been able to get away with that is that we have narrowed the definition of corruption. I want to call upon the House today to broaden the definition of corruption. We must look at the decisions that are made, the policies, administration, including legislation. The test to put is this particular law being enacted in the interest of the public or indeed private capital? Is this policy indeed in the interest of the private capital or indeed the public? Honorable members, you will be able to see that some of the problems that we are facing today are self-made. Because those that were charged the responsibility to make the decisions for on behalf of the Zambian people made decisions in the interest of private capital at the expense of the public. And the moment we change our lens and put on a fair lens, remove the politics out of that, because it's about Zambia. It is about Zambia. Because if $2.5 billion goes and disappears, it's money taken away from Zambia. We should wake up with a begging bowl to go and look for 1.3, but we're losing 2.5 billion. 1 billion for ZRA is lost just because a single individual makes a decision and says, forgive them, let them pay $23 billion. So you can imagine the work that the next government is going to have, Madam Speaker, to have to start recovering this money starting from 2.5 billion, 1 billion, the road concessions, the mines that were sold. It indeed will be a very huge task. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I wish to thank you.
The Honorable Member for Kafulafuta. The Honorable Member for Kafulafuta.
Madam Speaker, I immensely thank you for this opportunity to give a few thoughts on the motion on the floor. I must start by saying I'm heavily burdened, Madam Speaker, to discuss or to make a contribution on this motion, because sometimes we discuss very, very good motions here, but we fail to implement what we debate on. As already mentioned, Madam Speaker, by those who have gone before me, this is something that I think we seriously need to address with the seriousness it deserves. And I must say that all along, I have been very, very hopeful that the New Dawn government is going to help us and lead us in the fight against corruption and ensure that even if we don't wipe it out to 0%, but at least drastically reduce it. And I think that we are going to achieve more when we talk less and act more. Madam Speaker, I'm saying this because I think right now as I'm speaking in this House, thousands of bags of meal are leaving Zambia into Congo in my constituents. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 bags crossing per day. I'm talking about thousands of bags crossing into Congo. Now, what upsets and frustrates me is the fact that this year we have a serious drought. We have no maize in our nation. And how can a patriotic Zambian, or pardon me if this sounds unparliamentary, but How can someone in his right frame of mind decide to betray the Zambian people by committing such atrocities? We know very well that we need every single grain that this country has. Yet, we've talked about corruption. I have personally stood up. I'm not talking about something that I've not seen. I have seen vehicles cross into Congo, and influential people, some of them cadres who are saying we are in power, and they're saying they are raising money for campaigns for 2026. Millimil is crossing into Congo. And we are here, we're talking about corruption, and before we know it, the maize that has been imported, or the resources that we know that the government has made great efforts to try and alleviate poverty in this nation. We have one side, the government making frantic efforts to say, we want to save our people from starvation. And we have a few people who are busy crossing, rather taking Millimil into Congo. So I stop and wonder and say, when we talk about some of these things, how serious are we? And perhaps it's my personality that when I mean to talk about something, I don't want it to be rhetoric. When I say or I promise something, I want to live up to it, Madam Speaker. So, I'm not going to talk about a lot of things except that which I believe risks our nation to go into starvation. We need to do something very, very urgently, because one thing I know is we cannot fail to stop this scourge. As long as we mean what we are saying, we cannot fail to arrest this. If it were possible, Madam Speaker, you ask somebody tomorrow to say, did Millimil cross into Congo? You'll be told that, yes, Millimil, trucks of Millimil crossed into Congo. So I think that we need, starting from the leadership, we need to be serious when we talk about something. We need to ensure that that thing is followed up and is done. I know somebody suggested that the anti-corruption risks their lives and how much they're getting and so on. This has nothing to do with how much somebody gets. A corrupt person is corrupt. Whether you pay them in millions of dollars, they'll still receive illegal resources. So I want to rest my case, Madam Speaker, by saying we are going to make a lot of progress as a nation. When we talk about something, us as leaders live up to it, ensure that we follow through what we talk about. Otherwise, we'll just be talking and year in, year out, and nothing will be happening. But I'm really, really saddened and heartbroken to see that despite making efforts, checkpoints are everywhere in my constituency. Yes, yet Millimil is going out. When are we going to be patriotic to our nation and care for one another and love our country? With these few words, Madam Speaker, I wish to make my submission and support the report.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Kawata, please, if you can use just a few minutes so that we close the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the issue that we are talking about today saddens a lot of Zambians. Today, we are crying to say children are not sitting on desks. Today, schools are overcrowded. It's all because of the seed that was planted many years ago, the seed of corruption. And today, we are faced with this huge challenge. I could hear some people lamenting on laws that were formulated in this House. And that's the reason why, whenever you are formulating laws, let's ensure that we do not target individuals. Madam Speaker, the issue of education, I think for us to fight corruption, we need to ensure that education, the education system of our country should always start with the kindergarten. They should start knowing what corruption is all about. We know that our curriculum, especially civic education, talks about corruption, but we need to start now going down so that we can trickle it down so that people can understand what corruption is, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want also to talk about the issue of breaking traditional barriers or traditional beliefs. Madam Speaker, not long ago, we had certain people who believes that that's a dangerous cultural belief, Madam Speaker.
Meaning what, Honorable Member?
And those that work in the maize field should always eat from the maize, the field where they're working from. That is a very dangerous belief, Madam Speaker. Yeah. Madam Speaker, if we fail today to break some of these traditional beliefs, we will end up having our children acquiring property, Madam Speaker, which they never worked for. That is how today, Madam Speaker, we are faced as a country. We see wives who were mere housewives acquiring property because of the traditional beliefs, Madam Speaker. We need to break this traditional belief, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Kawata, it's like the owners of the phrase are not comfortable. Can you please maybe translate it for the last time? All the honorable members, can you please make your debate flow without...
Madam Speaker, that's my mother's tongue. I understand what it means. And that's the reason why we need to start breaking some of these traditional beliefs. Today, Madam Speaker, if you look at so many young children, so many children, you find someone at the age of 28. He has already amassed wealth over 28 million. Where is he getting the money from? Madam Speaker, if we want to fight corruption here in this country, let's ensure that we start breaking some of these traditional beliefs. Madam Speaker, also, let me also talk about decentralization. I think we need to ensure that the anti-corruption offices are decentralized in all the districts. We have 116 districts, but only 6 districts has the presence of the Anti-Corruption Commission. So we need to do a lot when it comes to that. Training of staff. Let's ensure that we employ a number of these anti-corruption officers. And let's also ensure, Madam Speaker, that we create a police unity within the Anti-Corruption Commission, just like our colleagues from the Drug Enforcement Commission have done. Madam Speaker, the issue of concluding cases within the specified time frame. Yes, I do agree that the President did actually issued a statement that there's need to improve on how we finalize some of these cases. Right now, we can see that cases of corruption will be concluded within 5 months. But in the past, Madam Speaker, we see that even those that committed serious crimes, they would actually hide in the name of seeking medical attention. And that's what has been happening. So today, Madam Speaker, let's ensure that we work on some of those issues. Madam Speaker, also on the issue of the forfeiture law that was talked about, I could hear the Member of Parliament for Nkana, the way he lamented, Madam Speaker. I totally agree with him, Madam Speaker, because I believe that this law needs also to be looked at and amended, because it doesn't also favor those that are, let me say it in this way, this law favors those people who are involving themselves in criminal activities. They would rather go and surrender just a quarter of it and keep the rest. So let's ensure that we find some spanners on how we can tighten up, ensure that these guys who are involved in stealing are not given chance. Madam Speaker, the challenges also of this law is that most of the people that forfeit some of these properties, they don't even forfeit everything. And that's the reason why I strongly believe that there's need for us to amend this law. Even the issue of disclosing how much money they have acquired, I think it is also a challenge. So we should make laws that will not only fight those that were there, but let's ensure that the laws that we formulate are laws that are going to stand the test of time. And this is what we should do, always yearn to do as members of parliament. Madam Speaker, like I started from the beginning, that corruption is a serious cancer. Today you steal from the poor. Today you decide to pocket $24 million, which is about 600 million kwacha. Madam Speaker, the ones who are going to suffer are the children that will be born after 10 years. The lack of medicine in hospitals, lack of school days in different schools. Even the creation of employment will be something of a challenge. Madam Speaker, with these few words, I want to say the good people of Kabata do support this report.
Thank you. I think we can't go any further. The Honorable Minister of Justice, please respond.
Okay, there we are. Honorable members, I've followed your contribution, Honorable Madam Speaker, and I will try to read my statement so that in the interest of time, I can respond also to some of what the members have raised. But in thanking the mover of the motion, of the report, I want to say that he touched on one word that if we Zambians really took it to heart, even the debate that has been long would be shortened, that indeed corruption is a crime against humanity. And it is indeed a cancer that all of us have to watch for. This concerns all of us. I also want to thank Madam Speaker, the seconder, who also really articulated the issue of gifts. To what extent do we know that this is a genuine gift? And to what extent does the gift become a way of softening our hearts so that when things come to our office or the positions we have, we do not have the power that we should have. Madam Speaker, allow me first of all to appreciate all the members that have contributed to this very important report. Clearly it shows that we as Zambians were beginning to be aware and concerned about the issues of corruption. I also want to recommend your committee on Legal Affairs, Human Rights and Governance for the work they have done for the third session of this 13th National Assembly. As noted by the committee, on page 1 of the report, corruption has remained a huge impediment on economic development that we need to gain as a nation. And therefore, ensuring an end to this vice in our country is a big concern of all of us, and in particular, the New Dawn government under his able leadership of President Hakainde Hichilema. As rightly noted by stakeholders, Madam Speaker, Article 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution of Zambia, being the supreme, raises these matters related to the fight against corruption. We have taken note of all the submissions that have been rendered by all the stakeholders, as well as the members of parliament here this afternoon, and the recommendations that the committee has also rendered from their tours, and indeed in their observations. And for this, we have taken as key notes as a Ministry of Justice. And we therefore are interested in aligning the definition of the public officer with that which is provided in the Constitution of Zambia. Madam Speaker, I wish to indicate that the fight of corruption depends on the adequacy of laws in our country, and therefore I am delighted that the committee observed the inadequacies and the need of the inadequacies of the framework governing the fight against corruption in Zambia. We have duly taken note of the committee's observation and recommendation, especially the following: the need to amend Section 11 of the Anti-Corruption Act of 2012, which vests the Director General with a sole mandate to give consent for investigation as to the decentralization of the powers to the Director General to a head of investigation at every provincial office as we decentralize this. May I also add that another area that we have noted is the need to amend Section 64 of the Anti-Corruption Act of 2012 by remove the requirement to obtain the consent of the Director of Public Prosecution before persecuting a matter under Anti-Corruption Act number 2012. In addition also, the need to have an existing policy as a guide to address the difference between what could amount to a gift, which the seconder alluded to. And lastly, the need to amend the public interest disclosure of protecting the whistleblowers as it is articulated in Act number 4 of 2010 to allow sufficient safeguards that guarants the protection of the whistleblowers. And also the members did allude to the fact that there will be need for some incentives. And also, Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, you are aware that the newly launched national policy on anti-corruption provides a framework for preventing and combating corruption in a comprehensive and coordinated manner. It is therefore that some of the main objective of this policy under His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zambia, President Hakainde Hichilema, is to strengthen corruption prevention measures in the public and the private bodies. It's also important to strengthen the transparency, accountability in the public affairs and delivery of public services. To add to that is also the strengthening of institutional capacities of the Anti-Corruption Commission, National Persecution Authority, and other law enforcement agencies, and also the point that the members raise of ensuring that there are more officers of the anti-corruption adhered to. Honorable members, there are a lot of things that were raised that I won't have much time to dive into, but believe that my ministry have noted all the concerns. In one of these concerns that was brought to with one of the members of parliament, it is the review of the legislative framework on the anti-corruption. The government under His Excellency is also reviewing this in a holistic manner, including the definition of corruption that the member of parliament did allude to. In addition also, I want to speak to the other issues of the public prosecutor in dealing with administration action and practices and procedures of the state. Their role is to advise state institutions and making recommendation to the state. It is with this observation, honorable members, that we feel that if this role is not protected, the integrity of the committee relating to both the public and the private sector will actually be misplaced as we look at the separation of powers. Honorable members, you must note that the president of this country, President Hakainde Hichilema, he has embarked on a very serious campaign to make sure that we as Zambia become like Singapore, where people are not celebrated for amassing wealth that was gotten dubiously. We as a nation, we need to get to a place where if someone amassed wealth in in not a correct manner, that is frowned upon. Unfortunate, as we have heard many are the times that people who actually amassed wealth in very dubious manner are seen to be gods in a small way or celebrated. And this is unpatriotic. Honorable Member, also for Kafula-Futa, you reminded us of the importance of us to be patriotic to this country and indeed to live a Zambia that is free from corruption. I therefore want to assure this House that your government, under his able leadership of President Hakainde Hichilema, is committed to fighting corruption, and it is to this end that I wish to state that the fight against corruption is a blind to all of us, and we all need to fight it together so that our society, our children to come, will find a better society, because indeed it is a cancer. I submit, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable Member for Kalawo Central wind-up debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, simply let me thank all the honorable members who have taken part actively to debate the motion. This is the Honorable Smoshi for Skongo, Honorable Mpundu for Nkana, for Munduvire for Mporokoso, Honorable Munewa for Kafula-Futa, Honorable Tayangwa for Kawata, and finally the Honorable Minister for Justice. And I would not comment on the remarks passed by the honorable members who have debated, as the Honorable Minister has already done so. So thank you very much, Honorable Madam Speaker, and I beg to move.
I put the question. The question is that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Legal Affairs, Human Rights and Governance on the fight against corruption in Zambia for the third session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Friday, 21st June 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary say no. The ayes have it. The question is resolved in the affirmative. I honor the Vice President. Adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is that the House do now adjourn. Any debate? Any objection? The question is agreed to. The House is now adjourned.
Thank you so much for still being with us on Parliament Television. The House has adjourned till tomorrow at 14:30. And before we leave, a recap of what has been considered on the floor of the House, and business resumed at 14:30 hours today. Joe, 3 announcements were made earlier in the day.
Yes, indeed. The first one, Madam Speaker did remind the House that on 28th March 2024, the Honorable Minister of Technology and Science made an undertaking to share with members of Parliament detailed information on the progress made in the construction of our communication towers in various constituencies. In this regard, Madam Speaker did inform the House that the Ministry has submitted a work schedule on the progress made in the construction of our communication towers. She added that the schedule has been distributed to all honourable members electronically. She therefore urged all honourable members to study the schedule and liaise with the Ministry of Technology and Science on any queries that may arise therefrom.
And the second announcement that Madam Speaker made was to inform the House that the Patriotic Front has appointed Mr. Parliament for Kasama Central as Deputy Party replacing Dhaka Parliament for Chadiza constituency.
And in the third announcement, the Speaker did recognize the presence in the public gallery of pupils and teachers from St. Joseph Pre and Primary School in Mumba District. And on behalf of the National Assembly of Zambia, Madam Speaker did welcome the visitors to the National Assembly of Zambia.
After those three announcements, the business proceeded, and Madam Speaker did render two rulings. And the first ruling was on a point of order raised on Tuesday, 19th March 2024 by Mr. Arakech Totela, Member of Parliament for Pambasha constituency, against Mr. B. Kambita, Member of Parliament for Zambezi East constituency, for the alleged use of parliamentary and demeaning language against him and other opposition members of Parliament. And Madam Speaker did begin by giving a brief background of what really took place on that particular day. That's Tuesday, 19th March 2024. She did say that when the House was considering question for oral answer number 312, and Honorable F.C. Mutati, Member of Parliament for Technology and Science, had just finished responding to a supplementary question, Mr. Arakech Totela, Member of Parliament for Pambasha constituency, raised a point of order. The point of order was premised on Standing Order 203 of the National Assembly of Zambia Standing Orders 2021, which provides for the conduct of members of Parliament. And Joe, she proceeded by saying that in her immediate response, the first Deputy Speaker did reserve her ruling to study the matter. And Madam Speaker had recourse to the verbatim record of the proceedings of the relevant day, and note that the point of order relates to a period when